Good afternoon, dear guests, and welcome to the webinar. We will just wait for a couple of minutes so that other participants can join, and after that, we will start our webinar. So, dear guests, once again, good afternoon, and welcome to our webinar, Ukrainian Voices from Abroad. My name is Anastasia Hunda. I'm a partnership manager and a board member of ESN Ukraine, and I will be moderating our event. Before we begin, on behalf of ESN Ukraine and our volunteers, I would like to express our gratitude to all European universities and ESN International for their valuable support of Ukrainian students at the times of war. And our agenda for our event is the following. So first, ESN President ESN Ukraine President Artem Tsalikov will give his brief introduction speech. And after that, Tanya Fedorchuk will present the results of a survey that was recently conducted by ESN Ukraine. And the next speaker, the President of ESN International, Juan, will cover the topic on key adaptations of Erasmus Plus program in order to more efficiently support Ukrainian students. And after presentations, there will be time allocated for Q&A and sharing good practices supporting Ukrainian students abroad. So, dear guests, please decide whether you are willing to share your experiences and examples how you support our students abroad. And if you have any questions, there will be time to ask them. So now let's welcome our first presenter, the President of ESN Ukraine, Artem Tsalikov. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Nastya. Good afternoon, dear guests. Welcome to our webinar. And in my short speech, I will briefly describe you what the situation around the student life and higher educational life in Ukraine currently, and what we are doing in this situation as volunteers of ESN Ukraine. So let's start. First, that's us. It's we are students, we are volunteers that share best practices that help internationalize educational system of Ukraine from the side of students here. And we are part of the big Erasmus generation family around the Europe. But as a part of Ukrainian society, as Ukrainians, now we are under attack as all our nation, but we keep on with our work. So from the 21st of February, we conducted 3 online sessions of the first 8 lessons within the first 10 days together with Red Cross Ukraine. Also, we created a temporary match system for youth refugees to help them find their shelter abroad. Also, we created a phrasal dictionary for Europeans to communicate with Ukrainian refugees, and this idea was shared with us from other volunteers from ESN Croatia, and many thanks for them. You can check it out if you scan the QR code. Yes, and we launched an initiative, Study for Ukraine, and with this initiative, we conduct info campaigns, promoting educational opportunities abroad, aggregate opportunities on Notion, and also we conduct surveys, and the first survey we will present right now, and we facilitate the results. Yeah, that's what we are doing right now. So let's move on to the survey. We conducted it together with key Ukrainians, two other key Ukrainian student organizations, and together with the National Erasmus Plus office. Yeah, it's pretty comprehensive. And we want to say many thanks to National Erasmus Office because our collaboration has never been so strong as today. Yeah. And Tanya will share the exact results of a survey. And I just want to say, I give you a feeling what to be a student or what to be an ESNer now in Ukraine. What does it mean? So to be an ESNer, or let's say to be a student in Ukraine now means to manage humanitarian aid warehouses. A couple of our volunteers and dozens and hundreds of Ukrainian students currently involved in humanitarian missions, and they work as volunteers. We as students weave camouflage nets in universities, in humanitarian objects and all the stuff to help our militaries. We speak up worldwide, and if you are a member of EU country or United States or another, you definitely had heard our voices. And we all Ukrainians and Ukrainian students, we have a common song on the loop. And now I just want to share with you what kind of song. Yep, something like that. And we live with that every day, and even more than once per day. To be a student in Ukraine now is to know what is the real underground life. And it's not kind of a Berlin underground life, it's a bit different. And the one important and painful point is to see how they destroy your alma mater. You can see the photos of Mykolaiv University that was shelled a couple of weeks ago, or Kharkiv State University that was shelled in the beginning of the full-scale war. And it's just buildings, but think about people and their fates. So we feel that it's not time just to stand for Ukraine, but to act for Ukraine. And we tell you to support us globally. If you're a foreigner, keep being updated and share info about Ukraine and act locally. There is a UI community definitely in your town, your city or university. So now we want to share some knowledge, some info that can be helpful in this process. So thank you. And I will pass the words to Tanya Fedorchuk. But if you have any questions, here you are. Okay, thank you.
So, hello everyone. My name is Tanya. I'm for a long time, I'm a volunteer in ESN. I'm also very glad to see you. And today I will try to shortly present the survey we've conducted. And I will put some main points which we think are very important for our European community. So first of all, we are aware that we are not fully sociological agency and we are not sociologists, so please do not be too harsh on us. We were trying just to take an overview of what our students are facing abroad, where they might need some help, so we knew better how to act upon this. And here are some results. So first of all, that's quite obvious, I think, for many of us. The majority of those who left Ukraine are women. So you might be aware that you will host probably a lot of female students. Of course, there is a percentage of male students who are also allowed to leave Ukraine because students are not under the mobilization law. However, our survey showed that there is quite a majority of female students being active. As well, you can see that these students are quite young. Many of them are around 18, 19 years old. Of course, there are even younger ones because we go to university in Ukraine when we are 17, sometimes even around 16. So those students who are 17, 18 years old might be now new students of your universities. Also, just to take an overview, we tried to reach as many different locations as we could. However, of course, the majority of the respondents were from Kyiv, where we are the most active and where we have the best reach to the student universities. So then we started asking them about their main issues or questions they face. First of all, we were wondering if students need any legal support abroad. 44% said yes to this, that they would love to have some consultants regarding legal aspects of their being in university or a certain country. Of course, there are still people who said that they partially need it or they do not need this help at all. Another question was if they feel that they need a psychological help. For instance, if they face some anxieties or mental disorders. 55% answered no. However, we assume that it can be also related to the fact that the psychological help is not that strong in Ukraine, and we do not have this culture of facing and acknowledging some psychological struggles. As well, certain people can start facing certain issues quite later. So after they finally settle down, they might start noticing some changes in their mental health. So it will be also one of our point of recommendations to the universities to try to provide some legal and psychological help where it's possible. Another question from us was if students need support or linguistic support or certain language courses. The majority said yes, that they would love to have certain language courses. And of course, we were asking them also if they think which language they prefer. 56% of students would prefer to have access to language courses, and 33% of them and 67% of them would want to have courses specifically of the national language of the country where they are now. That means that students in the majority would love to integrate better in the local communities. Of course, there are still 33% of students who would want to have certain support regarding their English knowledge. Then we were asking them how did they find about the educational opportunity. For instance, if they found scholarship grants or Erasmus opportunities online, or if certain universities were reaching them out. Unfortunately, the majority of the people still were not aware of opportunities, or they did not find it yet, so they did not answer this question. However, 14% said that they found their opportunity through the Ukrainian higher education institution, and 12% said that they found it through the internet or the news. So we would also encourage our European partners to reach out to the Ukrainian universities if they want to promote certain scholarships or grants, as well as not to be also to promote it via internet, social media, and all available online tools. Also, we were asking them if they have any difficulties, wishes, or criticism about the educational process abroad. We are aware that not many of them yet joined the university itself. However, they might already have faced certain difficulties with the enrolling into the university or creating or applying for it, etc. So the majority, 44%, said that they did not face any strong difficulties or certain problems. However, some did. And among those, the main issues were about over-bureaucratization, insufficient amount of information, problems with the documents from the Ukrainian higher institution, because, for instance, if for joining certain programs you need transcript of records, it's quite hard to get it if your university is not working, for instance, because it's bombed, or because the administration are also people and they're currently taking care of their families. Also, there is a lack of language skills. That's why students cannot join, for instance, or they just simply cannot find the opportunities, or they don't have enough financial means to join certain universities or programs. Then we were asking them if these students have ever participated in exchange programs, academic mobility programs, internships, or volunteerings abroad, because we think that, of course, as we love to say, once Erasmus, always Erasmus, and that once you join the academic mobility or exchange program, you feel more comfortable with finding another one, with navigating yourself through the program and through the establishing, applying, and so on. However, as you see, 83% of people have never participated in none of these things abroad. And if you match it with other aspects, such as that these students are quite young, that they are probably, for them, it's their first experience being abroad, not always they are accompanied with their families, etc. You can imagine that it's quite difficult for them to figure out what to do and how even to apply for certain programs or what they are required to do. Then we're also asking them if they know how the studies will take place. And 43% said that the studies will take place physically, 6% said that the studies will be hybrid, and 40% did not know yet how they are going to study, because we want to be a bit proactive and just to remind you that if your studies are, your university start classes being held online, for instance, that might be quite an issue for this type of students, because they do not always have means, be it technical means or internet or having private rooms for actually participating in online classes as stable as they would be able to do it from home. Also, we were asking our students if they received financial aid or scholarship. 26% said yes, 18% said no, and 54% said that they're still not aware about which program they are going to join. Of course, we are aware, and we will talk later about Erasmus program and how they can actually get the funding through Erasmus, but not all the students have this opportunity to join this program because, for instance, if you graduated from bachelor degree and this year you have to apply for master degree, you're not able to join Erasmus program because you're not a student in Ukraine anymore, so the mobility might be difficult. Then we were trying to figure out what is the financial situation more or less of the students abroad. So quite many students said that they will have to combine study with work, fully 53%, and at least partially to work 15%. We think that it's also quite problematic because, again, while we were talking that the students are quite young, that the mobility is quite new for them, it might be first experience abroad, and if they have to work next to their studies, their mental health, their physical health, as well as their studies might be affected quite heavily. Also, we were wondering about their accommodation situation because we are aware that many countries are creating certain programs where people, refugees, or people with temporary protection are hosted in houses, in the local families, or in other type of accommodations. However, we were wondering if universities are supporting the students to be accommodated in the student type of accommodation or in certain dormitories or subsidized accommodation next to the campus or in the city where they are going to study. Because often these people are relocated to different cities around the country and then they lack the opportunity to join the classes, or the traveling to classes is quite expensive and they do not have enough financial means to travel. So the majority did not know yet if the university will provide such help. 20% said yes, and 16% said that the university cannot provide any help for the accommodation. And for those who are already accommodated abroad, we were asking them in which type of accommodation they are now. So 11% are hosted by their relatives, 7% by the volunteers, and the rest you can see on the slide. And of course, we understand that this is let's say, the benefit and the advantage of those students who can be actually hosted by the relatives. However, if you're hosted by the volunteers or some other people which are not related to you, but even if they're related, you cannot live independent life. You are related on other people who can change their mind, the life obstacles can appear, etc. So we want to stress that students should be independent, that they should be able to continue their lives as normal as it's possible these days, and they have to be sure that they will be able to continue their studies no matter what. So here on the slide, there are a few recommendations for the universities. So first of all, we encourage all interested partners to create effective and affordable medical and psychological care centers for students. And of course, from where we provided the survey on Ukraine, however, we believe that this is needed for every student. We call for consultations from universities and events aimed at explaining the principles of mobility, existing exchange programs, and differences between the education systems in Europe, because it can be quite frustrating for students to understand what are ECTS, what are the exchange programs, how they have to navigate themselves through their studies. We encourage students to use available open resources to find studying opportunities abroad, and as well universities to use them to promote their opportunities. And we appeal to European partners in cases of online learning to make sure that there are technical means and availability for students to join those classes. We ask to disseminate information on financial support, scholarships, grants, and create funds where it's possible to help students, as well as to cancel tuition fees or reduce them to the possible mean. We call on educational institutions abroad to help students find housing or subsidize the housing where it's possible, and as well to promote the accessible and affordable accommodation. And in case you're working within the Erasmus Plus framework, we encourage institutions to be as open, flexible about opportunities as it's possible, as well as to be proactive. So if it's possible to pay the grants in advance or at the soonest point, please do so. If you can lift any language certificates, please do so. And if you have any, you can provide a free opportunity to pass the language test, please do so. And my last slide for today is about the checklist of the possible initiatives for your institution. Of course, it's not about to show you how badly you're doing, but instead to maybe inspire you with certain initiatives which could be done. Some of them are repetitive from the recommendations we've written inside the survey itself. So we will be really happy to see and also to participate in any events where you're explaining the educational system as well as the Erasmus program, where you can explain all the EU-based options for young people, such as volunteering projects, exchanges, exchange programs, etc. As well as you can promote financial support or even to initiate certain private funds, even if they're not big, but for instance, to pay for deposit of the house, it will be already a huge help for the students. Also, if you can create available language courses, or at least to point out where students can access them, it will be really nice. And in case of online studies, make sure that there are technical means. And if you can support us with the students with the safe housing, please do so. And the last but not least, we want to point out is that if you can, please encourage your university to support students and Ukrainians with spreading the information about the current events. It can be info events, webinars, conferences, organized classes and workshops about Ukraine, Ukrainian history and culture. So it should not be always about the current war, but we really believe that showing the perspective, historical perspective, cultural perspective can be also very useful in terms of the knowledge and education of the Europeans. And last but not least, this is our contacts. So please, if you have any questions or further cooperation ideas, you can contact me directly, or you can contact any of these organizations which were co-organizers of the current survey. Thank you very much. I hope that you seen how much you are doing actually already from those recommendations which we posted. And if not, you could find maybe some new ideas. We will be happy to answer all your questions.
Tatiana, we have one question regarding the distribution of students' majors or field of studies. Can we show this slide again?
I'm not sure it was on the slides. I think we did not have the major distribution slide, but you can find it in the survey. So if it's possible for you to open it and check, because I do not remember it from by heart, it will be nice. And meanwhile, I can also post it in the chat.
Yeah, I will try to make a screen now while the one will be presenting and share this info. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tatiana, for your valuable insights on this survey. And I'm sure that these results will positively contribute to the improvement of opportunities for Ukrainian students studying abroad. And I believe it is important to mention that many European universities responded really fast to the ongoing full-scale war. And they offered many opportunities for students that were forced to leave the country to join current semesters, for example, right in April. And such educational opportunities as Erasmus Plus are extremely valuable for us. And since this is the generation of young and proactive Ukrainians, they require in the present ability to gain education in order to be able in the future to come back home and contribute to the renovation of our country. And our next speaker, the President of Esn International, Juan, will present main adaptations of Erasmus Plus, which can be used to ensure proper support of Ukrainian students abroad. So let's welcome our presenter.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Anastasia. Thank you so much, Tanya and Artem, for the fantastic presentations. It's a great pleasure to be here today. Also, thank you so much to all the team for, first of all, carrying out the research, organizing the webinar. I think it's fantastic to have this data to look into how we can better support students. What else can we do? What is the role of the different actors? So I'm sure that for the next semester, this is going to be very useful. And I think that hopefully all the people that are attending the webinar can have this multiplier effect. Now I'm going to present my screen. Let's see if we can see it. Yes, I think you can see my screen now. Yes, can you confirm? Fantastic. So I'm going to be talking a bit about the more technical part of the adaptations that the Erasmus Plus program has undergone in the last few months to better support Ukrainian students and staff. This is something that ESN, together with other organizations like the European Students' Union and the European University Foundation, have been asking basically since the beginning of the war, since the beginning of the invasion, together with ESN Ukraine, to, as they explained in the presentation, look into how Erasmus Plus, the most famous educational program in the European Union, a program that we know can be very flexible if needed, could be used to better support students. Many adaptations have been made, and this actually, it's something very important to consider for the next semester to see how we can give a better use of those opportunities, because what we see is that, as we saw in the survey, many people do not really know. So what was the situation before the invasion? Let's start by that. Before the war, Ukraine, like other so-called partner countries, had limited access to Erasmus Plus mobility opportunities. And these opportunities were part of the so-called international dimension of the program. When these mobilities were happening, it was mainly European universities that were managing the mobility projects and the funds. So Ukrainian higher education institutions had a role sending, selecting the students, etc., but the funds were managed always by the European universities. And besides normal mobilities, Erasmus mobilities like the one that, for instance, my friend Artem undertook in Valencia, were just part of the story, because there were also other measures like capacity building projects. As for those of you who know how Erasmus Plus works, we have the program countries, which are EU countries plus other countries mainly from the neighborhood. Now the UK is not a program country anymore. And then the rest of the countries in the world are called partner countries, or now countries non-associated with the program. So we have the members of the European Free Trade Association, like Norway, Iceland, Liechtenstein, and then also other candidate countries. And the interesting thing is that the participation of non-associated countries such as Ukraine is covered through different type of funding, which has implications in how the students receive the funding. So this is something to consider. Also something important, now that Ukraine is an official candidate to the membership of the EU, maybe in the future, hopefully, Ukraine can also join the Erasmus Plus program fully as a full member, like other countries such as Turkey or North Macedonia have done in the past. Before the war, Ukraine was already very active in Erasmus Plus. You can see that in the years before the war, we only have data until 2019. Ukraine was sending a considerable number of students to Europe. You can see here that in 2019, it was almost 2,000 students, and that almost 1,000 students went to Ukraine for mobility. So that's quite remarkable. This includes students and staff, by the way. And as you can see, when it comes to the budget for the Eastern Partnership, so-called, Ukraine was taking most of it simply because it's the biggest country. Now, as I said, since Ukraine is officially a candidate member, this can change in the future. So basically, before the invasion took place, Ukrainian students could only take part in mobilities through existing agreements between universities, right? So for instance, University of Taras Shevchenko might have an agreement with University of Granada, and within that framework, mobilities were taking place. The new measures that were introduced in March introduced total flexibility, so Ukrainian students can use Erasmus funds without having pre-existing agreements. So this is something very out of the box. It's something that hasn't been done before, and therefore it can be a bit hard to understand for those that are not very familiar with the changes. Also, very importantly, flexibility also applies to traineeships. So Ukrainian students can not only access studies, but can also access traineeships. So what is the normal picture of how Erasmus mobilities would work before the changes implemented after the invasion? We have a sending organization, which is the Ukrainian higher education institution, and we have a hosting organization, the Erasmus Plus program country higher education institution. That's important because it's not only EU countries, right? So this also applies to Norway, Turkey, etc. Those mobilities, so Ukrainian students going to Erasmus Plus countries, were happening within the framework of interinstitutional agreements in which the sending organization informs the other university about the nomination, signs the learning agreement, also together with the student, etc. All those procedures that Erasmus students need to do whenever they go on mobility. Now, with the new changes, many of the required procedures for the sending universities, the sending institutions, have been eliminated. They don't apply anymore if they are not possible to do, because unfortunately, due to the to the aggression by the Russian army, many universities are not even properly functioning. Therefore, there is a need to have flexibility. And now, Erasmus Plus higher education institutions can act as both sending and hosting organizations for mobility for students and traineeships. So if I'm a Ukrainian student, I can go to a European university and I can do all my procedures there without necessarily having pre-existing agreements. So this is a very important change that makes the process completely different. And students can contact the hosting university directly to ask for information about the application process. In case there are more doubts, the whole process is managed by the national agencies that are the ones actually giving the funds to the European universities, right? So if I'm a Ukrainian student that goes to Spain, first I can contact the university that I want to attend, let's say Granada University, get information from them. In case there are some remaining doubts, the national agency can always provide more guidance on the topic. How does it work in practical terms, in terms of how to access the funding? Well, students who were enrolled in a Ukrainian higher education institution at the time of the beginning of the war can access these mobilities. So that's the important thing, that students were studying at a university when the war started on the 24th of February. And the only thing that they need to prove is this, that they were studying in a university. The European standard is very flexible, so therefore it is up to each country to define which kind of proofs are needed to show that the students were actually studying at the Ukrainian university. It can be any kind of electronic confirmation, it can be a document. There is also a lot of flexibility with that, but it has been the national agencies defining this in each different national context. And the duration of the mobility can be up to 12 months. This basically means that a student can start now in September for the whole academic year to do an exchange, and hopefully afterwards can return to Ukraine also, as my colleagues say before. And this can cover a number of things, can cover long-term study mobility, short-term training also for staff, even though this is a bit less relevant for now, and also traineeships, which is a different opportunity that also should be considered, because for many students that might have just finished, can be very interesting to access those opportunities. And the grants are considerable, right? The grants follow the international credit mobility rates. So the grants that Ukrainians were already accessing before. Depending on the country that they're going, it can be from 800 to 900 euros, 800, 850, 900, plus inclusion top-ups that can also apply if they go for certain types of mobilities, and traineeship top-ups can also apply. So the grants are considerable. And also, as we saw that the financial support is a big priority for the students, this can be a very nice remedy to ensure the needed support for students. This is a bit more technical, but basically just to know what is the scope of this measure. Any higher education institution holding the Erasmus Charter of Higher Education, which means any university within an Erasmus Plus country that is active in Erasmus Plus, can have access to these funds using their normal Erasmus funds. So the way in which they fund this is by using the funds that they normally use to fund mobilities between France and Spain, Spain and Italy, Italy and France, etc. They channel part of that. This is also why sometimes there might be challenge for universities, because they might have already pre-allocated all their funds, right? And in those cases, funding challenges can appear. This is why from the ESN side, together with our partners from different organizations, we have been advocating for more funds specifically to offer support for Ukrainians, so other students from other countries can also access the opportunities, right? There is a need for this kind of emergency fund that can also come from the national level using the procedure and the framework of Erasmus+. Which kind of funds can be used? Well, the existing funds from 2021 or 2022, but also the future ones, right? Like, so now the new funds that are being allocated can be used. And in the work program for next year, there's also a reference to support measures for the future. So the work program of Erasmus+, this kind of the document that explains the priorities and main actions, also specifies that there will be more support for Ukrainians next year. And well, basically this is a bit paradigm shift, because now students can receive, even if they don't come from an Erasmus+ country, they can receive this kind of normally European or Erasmus+ program countries only type of funds. So something very interesting, very useful for students that requires a lot of dissemination. And also a couple of important things that are a bit less practical for students, but we believe it's relevant to share, is that cooperation partnerships that universities, NGOs, and other actors normally do can refocus certain part of their funds to support Ukrainian students and tackle student needs. So if universities have cooperation partnerships that are normally projects with a significant budget, they can dedicate part of the money to support needs of the students, because maybe they need a part-time staff just to, like cover information for the Ukrainian students. So, they can dedicate staff time to support the students. Something very important, especially if you're a student representative watching this, that you can also try to push a bit your university. So this kind of support is also offered. And then there's vital flexibility for ongoing international mobility projects. So funds from mobility projects within the international credit mobility strand can also be used to support Ukrainian students. And the other thing that is coming is online language support that, as we saw, can be very much needed for many students. The most tricky part, in which we have seen a lot of challenges, and also different organizations like the European Students' Union have also been working on this, is the part related to the temporary protection status, like how students can actually access that international protection, and also the compatibility of funds that has proved to be challenging in certain countries. It's very important to understand that the differences are normally national, sometimes even regional, right? Because aspects such as portability and compatibility of funds are national. So it's important that students that are thinking to reallocate to a certain country take some time to research in which countries, like grants might be compatible, or you cannot apply for both grants at the same time, etc. Because it might be that you are doing both application processes and then they are mutually exclusive. And also there's a lot of challenges for students that were studying in Ukraine but are not from Ukraine, okay? Because Ukrainians do have access to this temporary protection status that still is issued at the national level, but for non-Ukrainians that were in Ukraine, and this was a big number of students, almost 80,000 if I remember correctly, that is a bit more challenging, okay? So something to consider is how we can offer support to those students as well. And then indeed, what we recommend is to think how organizational support that universities get can be moved to offer psychological, logistical support to students as well. Then a couple of reflections on the feedback that we got, I think also from Esn Ukraine, but also from the National Erasmus Office. Now, many Ukrainian students are thinking about what to do. Should I start a full degree mobility? So basically starting my master's abroad, starting a new degree, enrolling as a full-time student, which is of course a possibility. However, the very good thing about Erasmus, that these Erasmus opportunities, is that they are very flexible and they are exchanges. So in order to avoid brain drain and to ensure that students, as soon as it is safe, as soon as it is possible, can return to Ukraine, Erasmus can be a very interesting option, right? Because after the mobility, after the 12 months, hopefully students can return to Ukraine, enroll the university, etc., and reduce the risk of brain drain. What is also possible is to combine the Erasmus mobility with following some credits at the Ukrainian university, right? So this is also allowed, and it can be a possibility to ensure that Ukrainian universities still have students, that the classes are populated, that discussions keep on happening in the classroom, which is quite important. So as a summary, very fast, a couple of things. If you are a student from Ukraine, you can access Erasmus study exchange opportunities in any Erasmus Plus university, following their processes. That is the part that depends strictly on what the university does, right, in terms of procedures. And you can also access traineeship opportunities through Erasmus universities. They will be your sending organization, and then you can do your traineeship in an NGO, in another company, etc. And if you are a Ukrainian student, also make sure that you contact the higher education institutions, but also ESN sections, student unions, etc., because they can support you. They can offer you peer-to-peer support. Finally, if you are a student representative, you can discuss, and you should hopefully discuss, the implementation of these opportunities with your university to understand how things are going, what else you can do, what other measures can be taken. And also another idea can be to set up peer-to-peer mechanisms for Ukrainian students, adapting the buddy system, creating, like a system in which students are assisted for their needs. And of course, encouraging higher education institutions to create dissemination plans. There's some very good websites out there, so students can check the opportunities and can understand the process. And also an idea can be to create connections with the student organizations from Ukraine to help build capacity, to also, as Tanya explained, continue being updated, etc., right? Because it's very important to get an understanding of the situation, the needs, but even the history of the country, the reality of the students. So this is it from my side. Thank you so much. And now, of course, if there's any question, I will be happy to answer it. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your presentation and also for providing us with updates on the changes of the enrollment process and also explaining the system of Erasmus Plus, of funding and language support and so on. So dear guests, now we are moving to the last part. So if you have any questions, please raise your hand, or you can just write your message in the chat box and I can read it out loud.
I have one.
Yes, please.
One, can you, yeah, thank you. Can you share with us what could be, for example, the reason of denying the request of students in mobility? For example, I am a Ukrainian student. This is a very common thing that when people don't understand why the request was denied. So what's the most popular reason?
Yeah, so what can happen and what we have heard has happened, like in the last few months, it's that universities might say that there are no available funds, that all the funds have been already allocated to other mobilities. Like this is one of the main problems, because basically now that should not apply, because now they are receiving the contracts for the new year, right? Because universities apply for funds in February for the mobility funds, and then the confirmation is given of how much money they get around June, July. So they already got it, at least in most countries, right? So they can also use those funds to support mobilities, meaning that hopefully in September, it should be easier to access those funds. So that's the main problem, I think. But what they cannot say, I would say, is the legal part, because as you can say, like Erasmus allows it. It can be that there are, I don't know, like certain kind of national or local problems, but when it comes to the Erasmus framework, it is perfectly allowed because the flexibility, it's total.
Thank you.
Yes, please, Victoria, you can ask a question now.
One moment. Juan, can you? Okay, I can. Yeah, Victoria, you can.
I cannot hear her.
Yes, please check your microphone.
Do you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I wanted to ask, I didn't quite understand. So you were saying that now the sending institution and the accepting institution, it can be the same. Could you please explain a little bit more that, like, for example, the university, they can not only accept students, but they can also send students? Because I don't understand how it works exactly.
Yeah, it's a bit counterintuitive, right? But normally you need to have an existing agreement to go mobility, right? Because it's universities that do the process. But with the changes, the process has become individual as well, meaning that you as a student, as an individual student, can apply to the university without having a Ukrainian university involved in the process necessarily. You know, like normally you would need to go through the university because exchanges normally happen between universities. So now the Erasmus Plus University can play both roles, can do the whole process. So you are applying as an individual that was in a university when the war started for the mobility directly. So yeah, that's why we say like it's both sending and hosting, right? It's because you play both roles, let's say, but it's only hosting because let's say you as an individual are the one sending yourself to the university. So it's a bit of a change. And also it would be even more practical in terms of the sending role with internships. Because if you want to do an internship, you would go to the European university, you will discuss with the IRO, right? And then they will be the sending institution with an organization in your own country. I mean, in the country where you went, right? So you are in a university in Poland and you talk to them and then you find an NGO or a company and the university is the sending institution and the company or NGO is the hosting organization. Is it clear now, Victoria? Yeah.
Dear guests, are there any other questions to our speakers? Okay, so then we proceed to one of other interactive activities. Just a minute, let me share the screen. So you can either scan the QR code or go to the website slido.com and enter this code. And then we can start a little Q&A, but not from our side. Please let me know because I cannot see this on my page. So, okay, we will proceed and start our poll. Wait a minute.
Yeah, that's correct. Just play and you can see on the top the amount of people.
Sure. So please answer the question. Are you currently a representative of a university, ESN volunteer, or a student? Okay, I see 3 ESNers. That's great. The community is really large. So we have one more ESN volunteer. Not anymore. Not anymore a student or ESN volunteer.
Yeah, but that's great anyway, because our goal was to reach out the ESNers that can control the situation on the places. So.
Yeah. Okay, then we proceed to the next question. So what are the aspects of supporting students that weren't mentioned by our speakers would you find important? So it can be both from a student perspective, applying for Erasmus Plus, or from institutional perspective, that is international offices that are willing to get a specific type of documents or any other information from incoming students.
Anastasia, just a question. For example, if people don't want to type in, and can they just like raise their hands and say it?
Yes, sure.
Orally.
Just please, Artem, be in charge and turn on the microphones because we have limited rights.
Oh, okay, okay. So if somebody want to share something orally, please write on the chat.
Okay, I can see the answer, losing protection status. What happens next? Mm-hmm. So I guess this means that when students move abroad and they register for protection, they cannot be at the same time a student and have this status of a person being protected. I think it depends on a country where you want to study, and it's probably easier to figure out on a local level, but you can contact us and maybe we can just give a consultation or reach for other centers that are abroad. Information spread to the Ukrainian students losing protection status. Yeah. Any other answers? I'm not exactly sure what is meant by full studies. Maybe the respondent means that a person wants to apply for a full-time master's or bachelor's as a regular student at a university abroad. Yeah. Okay, I think we can proceed to the next question. Question number 3, what insights and recommendations of the survey of Ukrainian students surprised you the most? So this was our second presentation. It was delivered by Tanya. I can see 2 participants typing, so I'm waiting for replies. Very young students. Yes, that is how education works. So we have 11 years of school, and after that, students apply for universities. It's quite different in European Union. Lack of awareness about opportunities. Very young students working and studying, struggles from sending institutions. Yes, this is especially a problem for those universities that are currently destroyed or just do not function fully, that they do not need see that much importance in psychological counseling. Yes, so struggles from sending institution. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, maybe comment from my side regarding the psychological counseling.
Sure.
Yeah, I think that students we saw already all the stuff that can exist. So let's just move on without any help.
Yes, but actually there are a lot of volunteers in Ukraine that provide such help. So I think it's quite developed. So maybe it's easier to ask for psychological counseling or any other type of support in their native language. Yeah.
Could be.
And our last question, please tell us about initiatives implemented at your universities. It can be both from the institutional and student perspective that are aimed at supporting Ukrainian students. maybe you can give us some updates, what have been changed since February, maybe some facilitation for accepting students and so on and so on.
Dear participants, from the side of Esn Ukraine, I encourage you to, if you want to elaborate on your initiatives or initiatives that your institution implemented, because we are very interested in that information. So if you can turn on your camera and micro or just micro, would be great.
Yes, I already see 3 answers and 2 more people typing. So this feels really great that people are helping Ukrainian students. So the answers are accepting exchange students without agreements. Well, that's really helpful for students that study specific subjects and cannot find equivalents abroad. Also, solidarity, snacks, meals, taxes, solidarity, student something I don't guess, no language certificates. That is also very helpful. While since February, British Council, Goethe Institute, and other institutions that precede such language exams are not functioning. Accepting exchange students without agreements, it was already mentioned. Lower tuition fees for UA students, involving students in universities' activities. Yes, this is also really great for helping students to adapt in new circumstances. Another answer is psychological help. Yes, that's amazing. Also, 1 more participant is typing, so we are waiting. This is really great to see so many answers, and from my point of view, it's amazing, and I'm really thankful that European community is so supportive at these hard times for us. So another answers from our students representation mentor programs was created. Wow, that's amazing.
And people who wrote, for example, no language certificates or representation mentors program, can you write on the chat from which country or which university it was?
And it would be also interesting to hear about mentor program. So if the person who types this answer would like to speak and share the experience, we would be really grateful. Yes, so I think we can, 1 more participant typing, okay.
It's the first time when I see the snacks, meals, stuff, and I really like it.
These are some basic things, but they can significantly improve just how a person feels and feel more happy if have an ice cream. Sharing things.
Thank you for the link from Groningen and Vilnius University. Vilnius University. And Victoria, can you share, do you know any info? Does it really work? Has it impact or not, this mentor program? How many, for example, maybe you know how many people applied for this? If not, so don't worry. Yeah, sorry, I forgot that you cannot unmute. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, when the war started, our university was also reacting really quickly, and we also didn't have any kind of system or what are we going to do. And then we realized that students will be coming, but there is no one, we don't have enough human resources in our university to meet them, to take care of them. just to meet them in the bus stations and everything, and just to accommodate to do everything. And therefore, and also like me myself, I am an alumni of Esn University, so I really understand how it is important to, when you are coming to a different country, how it is important to have an ESN body. And now I am at Vilnius University Students Representation, so working with international students, and we created this program really fast, and we created all the trainings really fast. And what surprised us the most is that we had in total 200 students who wanted to become mentors, and it was like we just sent the registration and at the same day we had 200 students, and therefore we just stopped the registration because we didn't know how many students are going to come. And then we had this quick trainings and everything, and it was really nice to see that our community is absolutely ready and absolutely like wants to help students. And yeah, and it was really helpful because then we had all the mentors, they were meeting students, they were explaining how to navigate in our university, how to navigate in our cities, what discounts for Ukrainian, not only students, but just Ukrainians, refugees we have in our country. And basically just to be a friend also for students who are like running from the war. So I believe that it is one of the greatest things that we made. And yeah, so I'm just happy that that it helps.
Inspiring. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing. That was really interesting.
Also, I will share my experience a bit. Just like Victoria reminded me that I'm now at the international office in one of the universities as the intern, and I'm helping their office to accommodate other Ukrainian students. So it's actually how an idea maybe for some universities who also looking for an opportunity how to increase their capacity to host Ukrainians, or I mean, to host any exchange students, because we can imagine that there are a lot, and maybe with newcomers from Ukraine, there are even more. And I think that it was a very good idea for my university to kind of hire me as the intern and help them out, especially with the Ukrainians, because we can speak the same language. I know cultural aspects, let's say, of Ukrainian education. I can help them with recognizing certain student cards and so on, because they're mainly in Ukrainian, etc. So I think that it's beneficial for both sides, of course, for me personally, and also for the university to be able to help as much as they can to people who are coming to their university.
Thank you very much for sharing your experience. I think that helping other students is a very meaningful task to do, and this is really amazing. I see that there are a couple of messages in the chat box. Okay, yeah, it's about Ukrainian. Victoria, yeah. You put your hand down. So
it was the previous hand.
Yeah. Okay. So I think we come to an end. We as Esn Ukraine are very grateful for all people that attended our event today. And as I previously mentioned, we are grateful to European universities for supporting us. And such educational opportunities and other type of essential support is extremely important so that students can study and get a degree living in a safety and peace. But after the war finishes and Ukraine wins Our country will need an inflow of strong and determined people that will be able to contribute their professional efforts to renovate Ukraine, its infrastructure, economy, science, and everything that constantly, every day, is being destroyed by Russian military troops, rockets, missiles, and so on. So once again, thank you for coming. Thank you for supporting Ukraine, and stand with Ukraine.
And act for Ukraine.
Yes.
Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, dear friends.
Thank you.